Hey there, welcome to That Dang Dad. My name is Phil, and tonight we're talking hip-hop. What better place to discuss rap music than here with a white suburban dad pushing 40? Actually, I think that jokey observation is pretty out of date. When I was a kid in the 80s, hip-hop had just started to intrigue the white teens of suburbia and hadn't really become mainstream enough for lots of white parents to enjoy. And even in the 90s, it was a bog-standard comedy bit to show like a nerdy white guy listening to hardcore gangster rap.
I've got my pistol point cocked, ready to link shots non-stop.
But nowadays, they play hip-hop on oldies stations. Albums I got in trouble for owning as a teen, they get played over the loudspeaker at the mall now. And hyper-commercialization issues aside, I think this has been a really positive development because for a very long time, hip-hop has been a way for people on the margins, particularly black people, to tell their stories, to depict their struggles, to share moments of deep joy and sorrow. And there will always be chuds who love rap music. Hell, I was a cop who was blasting Rage Against the Machine in my cop car on duty. But I think the history of hip-hop is a history of positive cultural exchange that has enriched the lives of millions of people who began to hear stories from communities outside their own. And tonight, I want to tell you about a specific instance of that. I want to tell you about the rap album that changed my mind about law enforcement. Run the Jewels is the name of a collaboration between Brooklyn's LP and Atlanta's Killer Mike. Both were already veteran rappers in their solo careers, and after touring together in 2012, they decided to combine their talents into something greater than the sum of its parts, like a hip-hop Voltron. And in 2014, Run the Jewels released their sophomore album, Run the Jewels 2, or RTJ2 for short. Within weeks, the FCC declared the album all bangers, no skips, and with good reason. We're going to talk about 2 tracks from the album that planted and watered the seeds of police and prison abolition in my mind, even if I didn't fully realize that's what was happening at the time. The album came out just after I had quit working as a cop to move from California to Minnesota. I was still extremely pro-cop at that time, and in fact, I was in the application process at 3 different Minnesota agencies as well as the TSA. It's entirely possible that I listened to these tracks on my way to one of my interviews. So with that as my context, let's get to it. The first track that really started to get into my head is called Early. The track begins with Killer Mike rapping from the point of view of a man being detained by the police in front of his family. He tells it like this: "Could it be that my medicine's the evidence for pigs to stop and frisk me when they're rolling around on patrol and ask, 'Why are you here?' I just tell them because it is what it is. I live here and that's what it is." He chimed, "You got a dime?" I said, "Man, I'm trying to smoke and chill. Please don't lock me up in front of my kids and in front of my wife. Man, I ain't got a gun or a knife. You do this and you ruin my life. And I apologize if it seems like I got out of line, sir, because I respect the badge and the gun. And I pray today ain't the day that you drag me away right in front of my beautiful son." He still put my hands in cuffs, put me in the truck. When my woman screamed, he said, "Shut up." Witness with the camera phone on saw the copper pull a gun and put it on my gorgeous queen. As I peered out the window, I could see my other kinfolk and hear my little boy as he screamed, as he ran towards the copper, begged him not to hurt his mama, because he had her face down on the ground, and I'd be much too weak to ever speak what I seen, but my life changed with that sound. Now, obviously, this is a sad, infuriating story on its own, and if you've never been a cop, it's natural to find yourself in the headspace of the person having these things done to them. But for me, I was suddenly remembering being the one doing these things to people. Minus the very last bit where the mother gets shot, thankfully. I remember arresting husbands in front of their wives, parents in front of their children. I remember parents apologizing for being disrespectful, saying anything that they could to try to stop what was happening. I remember leading people away in handcuffs as kids and spouses cried and begged and pleaded. And I remember knowing what my decision to arrest would do to these families financially. As I've stated before, the city that I worked in was 90% first and second generation immigrants, many of them working 2 and 3 jobs just to put food on the table, jobs that have no problem disposing of people stuck in jail for the weekend or awaiting a bail hearing. And you may be thinking, hey asshole, if you knew what you were doing at the time, why were you doing it? And I mean, fair point. But at the same time, when you're in the middle of it, when you're part of a department culture and an American culture that worships law and order and tells you that what you're doing is what's best for everyone, it's easy to convince yourself that these things are almost like a form of tough love. It's easy to convince yourself that a little bit of pain now will protect people later, that this will either convince people not to hurt each other later, or that it will lock away someone and prevent them from hurting someone later. It's easy to convince yourself that you're providing an incentive not to commit future crimes. It's easy to convince yourself that you're the good guy. And of course, all of these justifications are wrong and completely undermined by mountains of studies and anecdotal evidence. But it's like they say, fish don't know they're wet. That's why this track came at a perfect time for me. I was a fish who was suddenly on dry land, suddenly aware of the existence of water. I was listening to this track and thinking, man, that really sucks. That's so dehumanizing. How awful for the kids. How scary for the parents to suffer so powerlessly in front of their children. And my mind kept wandering backwards to all the times that I was the cop in the song, and to the awareness that I've forgotten many of the times that I was the cop in the song. Times that the families that I harmed will remember forever. Law enforcement encourages cops to think of the public in terms of us versus them, as I've explained before, to see the world as full of stupid sheep, bloodthirsty wolves, and noble sheepdogs. On duty, it was second nature to see the people I was arresting as the enemy. Once outside of law enforcement, it was much harder to forget that actually these people were just people trying to live their lives, perhaps making mistakes or bad choices, but people nevertheless. People who deserved more dignity than I'd typically given them on duty. People who loved their children and for whom it was traumatic to see them so scared. It reminds me a lot of having grown up in a religious fundamentalist community and then leaving and having these little realizations years later that so many things that you were taught not only weren't normal, they were harmful. That people that you trusted had filled your brain with worms that made you a toxic person or brought out what was already there, and that you might never get the little bastards out of there for good. And that leads us to the second track from RTJ2 that really got my wormy cop brain spinning. And it happens to be my favorite RTJ track across any of their albums. A track with the honor of having the greatest title of any song ever. Close Your Eyes and Count to Fuck. Now this one is a much shorter example. As Killer Mike raps about starting a prison riot, he says of the corrections officers,
We killing them for freedom cause they tortured us for boredom. And even if some good ones die, fuck it, the Lord will sort them.
This line hit me like a fist to the chest when I first heard it, and for a simple reason. I'd been saying the same things about everything from police killing suspects to the death penalty to the Iraq War. For as long as I had been a political animal, I had been told or intuited from American neoliberalism that sometimes to make an omelet, you gotta break a few eggs. Sometimes there would be collateral damage. And it's tragic, but it's the price we pay for progress. At that time, if you had told me that you'd let 10 murderers off death row to save one innocent life, I'd have told you that actually, if you let 10 murderers live, you're risking dozens of innocent lives being murdered at their hands. Me, my dad, every cop I ever knew loved the Jack Nicholson speech from A Few Good Men. You know the one.
Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives. And my existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives.
And some of you are going to loathe me or make fun of me for what I'm about to say, and rightly so. But all the same, I'm going to be candid. Close Your Eyes and Count to Fuck was the first time in my life I had heard someone else treat my hypothetical death as acceptable collateral damage. And friends, it didn't make me feel very good. I was actually mad at Killer Mike the first time I heard that line. It was a very, how dare you moment for me. I don't know. I know there's a million rap songs about killing cops, but for some reason it was the cavalierness that got to me, the feeling that it didn't matter to him either way, that my life was that inconsequential to a stranger. And then about 45 seconds later, I went, oh. And one of my oldest brainworms died tragically at that moment. Rest in peace, you nasty fuck. Now, I want to be very clear. I didn't listen to this album one time driving down Hennepin Avenue and suddenly have this road to Damascus moment where I pulled over and tearfully accepted Assata Shakur as my Lord and Savior. On the left, we talk a lot about radicalizing normies, but I think what happened to me is possibly more common. I heard the right formulation of an idea at just the right time in my life for it to slip past all my little cognitive defenses and lodge itself inside me like a fungal spore, where it very slowly took root and started to spread throughout my mind. I wasn't anti-cop overnight, but these ideas were creating fertile soil in me, just waiting for other seeds to find me. So why am I telling you this? For one, I think it's generally interesting to hear how people who believed really terrible things have learned to stop believing in them. I think that's useful just in and of itself. But more specifically, this highlights something that I try to tell everyone fighting for a better world. You never know what might slip inside someone's brain if they find it at the right time. When LP and Killer Mike sat down to produce RTJ2, do you think they thought, oh baby, this is going to give a cop an epiphany? I don't think so. I think they were telling stories important to their lives and giving voices to communities that often go unheard. So I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't know what you bring to the table when it comes to building a kinder, more just world, but everyone is important in our movement. I don't know if you're the lore master with an insatiable appetite for reading thick books of theory and connecting old scholarship to new ideas. I don't know if you're l'artiste who can draw or animate or sing or dance or dress up or perform an idea in ways that help them find new audiences. Perhaps you are the specialist, an elite operative working in the shadows to edit videos, manage projects, organize and analyze data, and otherwise help causes be their most successful behind the scenes. Many of you may not feel like you have any special talent when in fact you are guardians of the vibe, the people who welcome newcomers into a community, who advocate on behalf of others, who check in when people disappear, who listen patiently, and who make sure that people feel included and dignified and cared for and safe. And some of you are the tanks, ready, willing, and able to draw aggro from our enemies, if you know what I mean. It's tempting to look at some of the big names with the big subscriber counts or the big followings and think, what I do doesn't matter, I'll never reach that many people, I'll never have the budget for costumes and studio time, I'm not funny enough or attractive enough or smart enough or tough enough to make a difference. And it's just not true. Nobody does what you do exactly like you, and you never know who's out there at just the right time in their lives that the way you do what you do hits them just right. Two veteran rappers from two different parts of the country made an album in 2014 that snaked its way into my heart. That same year, I saw a strange man named Slavoj Žižek discuss the philosophy of ecology in a film from 2008 called The Examined Life, and his odd way of analyzing things made me curious about Marxist thought. Searching for more Žižek videos on YouTube influenced the algorithm to send me to PhilosophyTube, where a short video by a young Abby Thorne from 2018 introduced me to an academic book written in 2015 called The Capacity Contract by Stacy Clifford Simplican, a book that changed the way I thought about everything. I started making videos in 2019 because I was inspired by both of them, and during the 2020 BLM protests, I discovered police abolition from blogs that introduced me to Angela Y. Davis's 2003 book, Are Prisons Obsolete? I made a video about it based on my experiences, Thought Slime shared it on their channel, and this brought me a huge, diverse audience. And one person in that audience, shout out to Fern, convinced me via YouTube comments that the psychiatric industry was a toxic outgrowth of the prison industry, leading me to do research that forever changed the way that I think about ableism, saneism, and how we treat people in mental health crisis, helping me connect in my own praxis the movement for abolition to the movement for disabled justice and ultimately the dissolution of capitalism. All of these people were operating at all different levels of fame and fortune, and none of them could have predicted the role they would play in me getting a tattoo of the communist symbol from Disco Elysium, which is incidentally one of the most influential video games of the modern era, and it has its origins in a tabletop role-playing game invented by a bunch of depressed artists in Estonia in 2005. What makes you think you can possibly predict the impact that your work is going to have? How can you possibly know whose lives you're going to touch in the future or where your work will travel? You can't. So get out there and make your shit. What have you got to lose? Anyway, enough from me. Your turn. Tell us about a song or an album that changed your mind about something. How has music altered the course of your life? Or tell us about a time that you were positively impacted by a YouTuber no one has ever heard of, or a book self-published by an obscure author. Remind us that even the smallest works can change a life. Thank you as always for changing my life by spending your time with me. If you like this video, you know what to do. Hit all the buttons and then share it with somebody that you think might get a kick out of it. As for me, I'm probably going to go listen to Blockbuster Night Part 1 for like the 1000th time. Stay safe out there. Hope to see you on the next one. Have a good night.